Why is it that the more aware you become of your dark side, the more tired, detached, and unmotivated you feel? You thought self-discovery would bring power, but instead it brought silence. Today, we explore why facing your shadow often kills your motivation, and why that's the best thing that could ever happen to you. At the beginning of every man's journey into self-awareness, there exists a fire, an ambition that pushes him forward. This fire often burns with the need to prove, to achieve, to be seen, and to be accepted. In the outer world, it manifests as relentless pursuit of success, validation, power, or love. On the surface, it looks like strength. It looks like motivation, discipline, even purpose. But beneath that flame is a deep fear. A fear of being insignificant. A fear of being unworthy. Fear of being seen for who you truly are when all the masks are removed. And it is from this fear that much of what we call motivation is born. This is where the shadow waits, unnoticed, unnamed. It's not simply the dark side that movies or psychology memes talk about. It is every part of you that you have rejected, denied, or hidden. It is every childhood wound you buried, every insecurity you laughed off, every envious thought you pushed away. It is the version of yourself that you never wanted to admit existed. And for years, you ran from it, not by hiding, by becoming better, but chasing more. The gym body, the promotion, the perfect partner. You thought if you could construct a powerful enough outer identity, the inner wounds would never be revealed. So your motivation thrived. But it was not real. It was born from compensation. You weren't inspired. You were terrified. You were doing everything in your power to never feel small again. That fear, that avoidance, gave you energy. It created motion. It even earned you applause. People looked at you and called you focused, driven, successful. They never saw that what fueled you wasn't clarity. It was suppression. But the deeper you went, the more this motivation began to lose its grip. You started to notice that your achievements felt empty, that your highs were fleeting, that no matter how much you won, a part of you remained untouched, unfulfilled. This is when the shadow began to stir. Because true transformation never happens when you're winning. It happens when the ego begins to tire, when your soul grows restless with the game you've been playing, when the noise of ambition becomes unbearable and silence becomes seductive. Eventually, you confront the shadow, sometimes through trauma, sometimes through isolation, sometimes through years of inner work. However it arrives, it marks the beginning of the end, of the illusion. You look into the mirror and for the first time, see the truth. Your strength wasn't strength. It was fear dressed in discipline. It was insecurity masked by goals. It was emptiness wearing ambition like armor. And the moment you accept this truth, something happens. The fire goes out, not completely, but enough to scare you, enough to make you wonder if you've lost yourself. Because suddenly, what used to drive you no longer moves you. You don't want the same things. You don't care about the same prizes. The applause grows quiet in your ears. The chase loses meaning, and you're left in a strange kind of stillness. This stillness isn't depression, though it may feel like it. It is not laziness, though others might accuse you of it. It is not failure, though your past self might whisper it is. What's actually happening is that the fuel source is gone. The illusion of strength, born from fear, has been drained. The shadow has done its job. It has exposed the lie you were living. It has taken from you every ounce of motivation that wasn't real. You might resist it. Try to go back to the old energy. Push yourself harder. Set new goals. Chase new highs. But it won't work. The fire you had no longer burns for the same things. You're no longer blind. You've tasted truth, and truth has a cost. It burns through false identities like fire through paper. And when it's finished, all that remains is the question, what now? In this space, many men panic. They mistake the silence for weakness. They think something is wrong with them. They go looking for new motivational hacks, new productivity systems, new identities to try on. But all of it feels hollow, because once you've seen your shadow, nothing false can satisfy you again. You can't go back to using fear as fuel. You've outgrown it, and with that loss comes grief. A quiet mourning for the self you used to be, the man who once believed his strength was real. There is a moment in every serious inner journey when the image you've held of yourself begins to crack. It doesn't happen overnight. It begins subtly, You notice that you no longer react the same way to praise or criticism. You begin to feel strangely disconnected from the goals that used to ignite you. You hear your own voice when you speak in public or with friends, and it sounds like someone you're impersonating. That's the beginning of the collapse of the inner persona. The personality you've built, the identity you've clung to, and the self-image you've fed for years. The persona is not inherently bad. In many ways, it's necessary. It allows you to function in society, to play roles, to build relationships, and to protect yourself. But over time, the persona hardens. It becomes less a mask and more a prison. What starts as protection turns into performance. You begin to believe you are what you pretend to be. You become the responsible one, the strong one, the successful one, the kind one. You repeat the role so many times that the person underneath it becomes a stranger even to you. This inner persona becomes the filter through which you experience life. Every decision, every relationship, every ambition is measured against its expectations. You become terrified of anything that might threaten it. You reject feelings that don't match its image. You suppress anger because the persona is calm. You deny sadness because the persona is confident. You ignore fear because the persona is brave. And with every act of suppression, the real you is pushed further into the dark. Eventually, the shadow, the part of you that holds all these rejected aspects, grows powerful, not because it is evil, but because it has been ignored. The more you avoid it, the more influence it has. The more you pretend, the more unstable your identity becomes. And then something triggers it. It might be a crisis, a failure, a loss, or simply a quiet moment where the weight of your false self becomes unbearable. In that moment, the persona begins to break. You can feel it. The words you once said with certainty now feel rehearsed. The beliefs you fought to defend feel empty. The motivation you once carried begins to dissolve. You no longer know what to strive for, because the identity that gave you direction has lost its meaning. It's like watching a monument you built your whole life begin to crumble. Brick by brick, piece by piece. This collapse is terrifying. It feels like losing your mind, your purpose, your place in the world. You may try to hold the pieces together. You double down on discipline. You try harder to be who you were. You seek validation from others, hoping they will remind you of who you used to be. But none of it works. Because deep down, you've seen through the illusion. You've glimpsed the false self behind the persona. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You begin to feel like you're disappearing, like something inside you is dying. And in truth, it is. But it's not your real self that's dying. It's the identity that was built out of fear, expectation, and survival. The self that was shaped to be accepted, not to be whole. This death is painful because it feels like a loss of everything you've known. You feel detached from the world, from your friends, from your own ambitions. You begin to question everything. And the more you question, the deeper the collapse goes. You may find yourself unable to do what once came naturally. The conversations feel hollow. The goals feel meaningless. The rituals feel robotic. You are no longer performing, but you don't yet know how to live. The inner persona is no longer in control, but your true self has not yet fully emerged. You are in a psychological free fall, suspended between two identities, the one that's dying and the one not yet born. This in-between space is where many people give up, not because they are weak, but because the collapse of the inner persona is brutal. It strips away your certainties, your comforts, your masks. It exposes the raw, vulnerable self you've been hiding from. It brings up memories you thought you buried, feelings you never wanted to face. It forces you to sit with yourself without distraction. And in this stillness, you meet the parts of you that the persona always kept locked away. You might be tempted to rebuild, to create a new persona, a better, more spiritual version of yourself. But even that is a trap, because the point of this collapse is not to replace the old mask with a new one. It's to remove the need for a mask altogether. But before that happens, everything false must die. Every illusion, every lie, every performance must be seen, acknowledged, and released. The collapse is not just the destruction of a personality, it's the dismantling of your attachment to it. After the mask breaks and the persona begins to fall, you enter a strange and disorienting phase. It's not filled with clarity or instant peace. It's not followed by inspiration or new strength. Instead, it feels like silence, an overwhelming stillness that creeps into your mind, your emotions, your entire being. This stage is not a reward for facing your inner darkness. It is the void that comes when all illusions have been stripped away, but nothing has yet replaced them. It is the emptiness before transformation. Most people are not prepared for this void. After confronting the shadow, they expect a breakthrough, a surge of power, a sense of direction, a moment of enlightenment. But the soul does not evolve in predictable patterns. Growth, especially the kind that comes after facing the truth of yourself, does not feel like growth at all. It feels like being lost. You no longer know what to do with yourself. The routines that once gave your life shape now feel mechanical. The values you lived by no longer resonate. The people you were once close to feel far away, even when they're right beside you. There is a disconnect between who you were and who you are becoming, and this gap is filled with emptiness. This emptiness is not an absence of life. It is the space between lives. It is a psychological limbo where the old self has been shed, but the new self has not yet formed. In mythology and mysticism, this is the desert, the cave, the underworld. It is the time of exile, where the soul must wander without answers. This place is where transformation is forged, but from the inside, it feels like nothing is happening. You feel numb, detached, hollow. The passions that once burned within you have cooled to ash. The identity you carried has dissolved, but you cannot yet speak the language of your true self. You are between death and rebirth. In this state, ego panics. It cannot tolerate emptiness. It needs meaning, identity, structure. It tries to rebuild something, anything, that can make you feel like yourself again. You may be tempted to chase distractions, to pick up a new goal, to force yourself into action. But nothing sticks. Everything feels like noise. Even the most exciting opportunities feel like empty gestures, because the fire that once fueled your ambition is gone, and the new fire has not yet been lit. This is a stage that many confuse with depression, and while they may appear similar on the surface, they arise from very different places. Depression is the suppression of pain. This emptiness is the aftermath of truth. There is a reason this part of the journey is rarely talked about. It is not glamorous. It cannot be marketed. It cannot be taught through 10-step formulas or motivational speeches. It is slow, quiet, and deeply internal. It's the space where you no longer recognize yourself, and yet have no choice but to remain still. There is no going back to who you were. The path forward is unclear. So you float, you wait, you grieve, not always consciously, but deeply. This stage is also marked by a profound loss of meaning. The narratives that once gave your life structure collapse. The idea of success seems artificial. The need for approval feels irrelevant. Even spiritual ideals, if built on ego, lose their power. You begin to see how much of your life was built not on authenticity, but on survival. The structures that held you together were never truly yours. They were adopted, absorbed, or inherited. And now with those gone, you are left with silence. This silence is not your enemy. It is the soil in which something real can finally grow. But to the ego, it feels like death. It feels like failure. It feels like giving up. The ego does not understand transformation without control, achievement, or identity. But the soul knows better. It knows that this void is necessary. It knows that this silence is not the end, but a sacred beginning. Still, knowing this intellectually doesn't make it easier emotionally. You will question yourself. You will feel invisible. You will wonder why nothing excites you, why you no longer belong, why your energy has vanished. You may look at others who seem full of life and wonder what is wrong with you. You may try to resurrect old dreams just to feel something again. But they no longer fit. They no longer speak to you. They were built for a different self, and that self is gone. You are being emptied so that you can be filled with something deeper. But in the meantime, you are asked to sit with the void, not to escape it, not to fix it, but to surrender to it. This is where transformation truly begins. Not in the explosion of change, in the quiet unraveling that precedes it. There is a certain kind of motivation that burns hot and fast. It comes from pressure, insecurity, the need to prove something to others or to yourself. This drive is what most people know. It's celebrated, praised, even idolized. You're admired for how hard you push, how much you endure, how relentless you are. But this kind of motivation is a response to fragmentation. It arises not from wholeness, but from inner division. A part of you is running from another part. You move not because you are whole, but because you are split. The ambitious man is often a wounded man, and the source of his motivation is often the shadow he refuses to face. But once the shadow is brought into the light, once the hidden, repressed, and painful aspects of the self are finally acknowledged, the structure of this motivation begins to crumble. You no longer feel the frantic pull to outwork everyone, to be seen, to dominate. The high-stakes urgency fades. There is no longer a war within you fueling the fire. You find yourself standing still, uncertain, even uninterested. And yet, this isn't the end of drive. It's the end of false drive. What comes next, though it arrives slowly and silently, is something altogether different. This new form of motivation doesn't come with adrenaline. It's not dramatic or obsessive. It's not about chasing identity or recognition. It emerges after a long process of inner integration, when the parts of you that were once scattered, suppressed, or rejected have been faced, named, and accepted. When you are no longer at war with yourself, your energy returns, but in a completely different shape. It is no longer fire, it is direction. It is not impulse, it is clarity. You begin to move from a place deeper than the ego. You don't wake up driven by fear of falling behind or by comparison to others. You are moved by something internal, something quiet, steady, and impossible to explain to those who still seek performance over presence. The work you do feels more authentic. The goals you set are more precise, less inflated. You no longer need to prove your worth, so your actions become aligned with truth, not with compensation. This is not the drive of someone who needs to become something. It is the movement of someone who has already arrived within themselves. When the shadow is integrated, it no longer controls you in the background. Your anger, envy, fear, sadness, they no longer sabotage your behavior from the dark. They are now known to you. They sit beside you instead of against you. You don't suppress them, you use them as information. And because of this internal harmony, your decisions are cleaner. You don't need to act out your inner wounds on the stage of your career or your relationships. You no longer confuse ambition with healing. You don't seek applause as a substitute for self-acceptance. The drive that emerges from integration is not loud, but it is indestructible. This kind of motivation cannot be faked. It does not fluctuate with mood or external reward. It's not fueled by hype. It doesn't require you to constantly chase something new. It's the kind of motivation that allows for rest, for quiet, for reflection. Because it is not afraid of silence. It's not trying to escape anything. It exists because it reflects who you really are. When you act from wholeness, the action itself becomes the reward. You are no longer trying to reach something outside of you. You are expressing something that already exists within. This is why so many people feel lost after facing their shadow. They haven't yet reached this phase of integration. They are still mourning the death of the old drive. They are still adjusting to life without the mask. They feel numb because they haven't yet learned how to move without pressure, without guilt, without fear. They don't yet trust that motivation can arise from peace. They associate stillness with weakness, when in reality, it is the soil of true strength. They believe they are broken, when in fact they are being rewired. And then, one day, after enough silence, enough time, enough inner stillness, something stirs. You feel drawn to build again, to create, to move. But this time it is different. You don't rush. You don't force. You don't inflate. You are not trying to be seen. You are trying to express what is real. The drive comes from the center of your being, not from the edges. It doesn't seek approval, it seeks expression. It does not want power, it wants alignment. It no longer needs to prove. It simply needs to exist. In this space, the world may still misunderstand you. They may think you lack ambition because you don't chase as frantically. They may think you've given up because you've stopped performing. But what they don't understand is that your drive is no longer about performance. It is about purpose. It is no longer a scream. It is a quiet hum that resonates with who you truly are. And that hum is more powerful than any roar fueled by desperation ever could be. When you begin the journey inward, you expect to find strength. The first thing you discover is exhaustion. The fire that once pushed you forward, status, ambition, validation, sputters out when you realize it was never truly yours. What you thought was drive was often a clever disguise for fear, and when that fear dissolves, so does the energy it gave you. You feel lost, aimless, and strangely silent. This silence is not the end of your story. It is the falling away of the old self. The collapse of your inner persona is painful because it takes with it the identity you spent years building. You no longer know who you are without it. You float in a space between who you were and who you're becoming. This emptiness feels like death, but it is the soil of transformation. In this limbo, the soul begins its quiet work. It doesn't scream for attention. It whispers in moments of stillness, asking you to stop pretending, to stop running, to stop performing. The motivation you seek, the real kind, doesn't rise from ego or from fear. It is born only after the shadow has been seen, held, and integrated. Only then do you begin to move, not because you need to prove something, but because you have something genuine to express. This is not urgency. It's clarity, not a rush for achievement, but an inner alignment with who you truly are. You have no motivation left because the false self has died, but something greater is forming in the quiet. And when it finally emerges, it won't burn out, because it won't be chasing anything. It will simply be becoming.